find out. All right, that's all up. This is the last section that we're going to do with this water unit. I'm still making your test. I'm a little over halfway. I forgot my remote. I'm a little over halfway done. It should be finished, depending on how fast we get through this. We actually may finish it today in this class. Not plug in my remotes. Where's the right port? Okay. Yesterday we did El Nino and La Nina. And today is very much related to that because we're going to talk about what happens essentially in an El Nino when the ocean gets too hot. Basically, how does it try to fix itself? Can it fix itself? What are the immediate effects when we have a major fluctuation in the temperature of the ocean? And when I say major, it's like a degree. It does not take much. And why does it not take much for that matter? Whereas the atmosphere seems to have a much larger swing of temperatures, whether it be warm or cold. So for today, what would a warming ocean do to life? But yes, change it, but how? What is it that increasing temperatures of the ocean would do? Yeah, the Earth's temperature would have the atmosphere actually goes up first before the ocean changes. Because the atmosphere has a much more noticeable swing in temperature. But if the ocean warms, what does that do to the planet? The most immediate effects that we have talked about would be like the melting of ice, which would then raise the level of the ocean, which then will affect the streams in the ocean, the currents in the ocean, which then makes our weather just absolutely insane. Yeah. Oh yeah, we're all doomed. We're all gonna die. It's gonna happen. You're gonna pay taxes and you're gonna die. Sorry. It's a fact of life. That's why you need to enjoy life and make the most of it while you're here. Okay. All right. I am hoping that this is animated right. I didn't even check it until right before you guys showed up because I've been trying to get caught up with everything from the last couple of weeks. Like I said, with attendance, I am working on it. It's when there's subs, their attendance is going to override just about anything I attempt to do digitally. So like I said, I'm resorting to writing stuff out on paper, like giving them like how I do paper attendance. And we'll see if that fixes it. We have mentioned the first one is actually slightly more than 70%, but water covers the bulk of this planet. This should not be a new thing for you. We've talked about this repeatedly. I need to fix the staple in this. The ocean is a temperature sink. It's a heat sink. Any of you that deal with computers and understand what that compound does. The ocean has the ability to store a whole bunch more heat than the atmosphere does. So you would notice, let me put this up. You would notice the temperature change in the atmosphere first, and it's a much wilder swing, whether it be warm or cold for that matter. And then if you give enough lag time, then you're going to see a responding change in temperature of the ocean. I think there's one more bullet on here. No, there's not. Let me go back. your water, and specifically ocean water because of its density, but just water in general, has a higher what is called heat capacity. Now, this is more of a chemistry thing. And it's weird that I'm doing water with both chemistry and you guys at the exact same time. But because of the heat capacity of water, it has the ability to hold and store more heat. It actually has the ability to store a heck of a lot of carbon dioxide as well, which is a good thing. And I always think it's funny that they want to talk about scrubbing carbon dioxide out of the ocean. That would be a horrible decision to try to do that, but oh well, that's what they're talking about doing. The ocean is going to take the bulk of your solar insolation, the radiation from the sun, the incoming rays from the sun, and it's going to transport that. And like we said before, the ocean is really the thing that controls the temperature of this planet. Is it holding the heat or is it releasing the heat back into the atmosphere? Oh, my allergies. I thought that rain would have fixed this. It would have worse. My poor sister just got a new car for her daughter and they got pelted with baseball size hail. Sorry for her. No, it's not. And I know they got insurance, but gosh darn it. I think they got that car a week ago? Sometime last week. It's just sad. You know, at least I heard a little bit of pelting on the roof, but it wasn't anything big. At least not, right across the street. The motion of currents that are in the oceans themselves do not circulate as a whole very quickly. It can take dozens of years, it can take hundreds of years. Especially if we're talking about the conveyor belt, which I'll pull that image somewhere. Yeah, I'll pull those images back up here in a little bit. Your northern parts, because we focus on North America since we live there, but your northern parts, like towards the Arctic, their heat source is primarily from the energy that is being transported on your streams. Like the Gulf Stream takes warm water up towards the British Isles, Ireland's, technically Scotland is not its own country, it's part of England, even though they're still trying to secede. In the winter time, most of their heat is actually brought up from the ocean currents themselves, from us, from our way. It rides up the east coast of the United States, jumps across the ocean, and it plants itself over by England. We talked about ENSO yesterday. It's the El Nino oscillation. ENSO and NAO are major. The flip-flop between the ocean and the atmosphere, that interaction, these are the two major ones that we deal with. But we talked about ENSO yesterday. That was the back and forth between El Nino and La Nina. Turn my volume down here. I have a whole bunch of slides today, but there are so many pictures, we should be able to get through this pretty easily. No, stop it. Stop it, turn it off.
Chicken 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, turn it off. Lord.
There's not wrong with that.
Except it's illegal to do it, but okay, so, when the earth warms, yes, we've got this radiation from the sun coming in, and depending on where you have absorption or reflection, with the albedo effect, you're going to see it first in the air, but eventually it's going to be held onto and absorbed by the ocean. It takes a lot longer for the ocean to release the heat compared to air, compared to the atmosphere. It just has to do with the density. Yeah, there's moisture in the air, but there's nowhere near as much moisture in the air as there is in the ocean. And that should not be a difficult concept for you guys to understand. When you have a rise in the sea level because of increased temperatures and melting of ice, you have a change in salt content of the oceans themselves. Now, depending on where you take a sample of the ocean, it could be more salty or less. It tends to be way more salty towards the equator, and it tends to be much less salty towards the poles. And it has to do with the evaporation of the water from the oceans themselves. Where you've got more direct sunlight, i.e. the equator, you're going to have more evaporation. And so you're going to have removing of fresh water, which leaves the salt water behind, and it drives the salinity up. At the poles, you have less absorption. You still have water moving there, fresh water being circulated. So poles tend to be much less salty. Our ocean has a really good ability to absorb excess carbon dioxide. It does get altered depending on the salt content. We're still getting data on these, and that's what sort of makes it difficult for me to start getting into the global climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call this section we're getting ready to go into, because we're still pulling data. And a lot of the stuff that was first done when I was your age, the scientists that were hired on to prove that global warming, because that's what it was called back then, was global warming, was a thing, like faked a bunch of stuff. And that's still part of our models. So, not that humans are 100% bad, but yeah, if we don't watch what we're doing, we have a major impact on how our Earth is going to respond. And if we make the Earth mad enough, it is going to retaliate in some way, shape, or form. It can have increased insane weather, which we had some wicked storms come through last night. Can cause flooding, can cause droughts. It depends on where you are as far as what is going to happen. But the higher the temperature of the atmosphere, the more moisture can go into the air, and the more insane the storms are going to become. Or maybe extreme would be the better phrase, because like I said, it could be droughts, it could be floods, it just depends. All right, this image, I'm pretty sure I put in Canvas. This one was as far back as 2000, 285. So 90, 95. Yes. Okay. So these were as far back as 2000. A lot of the models that I keep yanking, maybe through 2010. So like I said, like we're trying to project the future on stuff that's rather recent. We had, oh my gosh, my eyes, they are so red because of the pollen. I have to put my glasses back on because I can't read this. You've got your major oceans here. Do we have one more bullet? I don't. I couldn't go back. You got your major oceans, and we actually had a cooler time period. So that would, I hope none of you are colorblind. That would be the blue. And then starting around 1965 to 1970, we started seeing a major uptick in temperatures across the planet as far as the oceans are concerned. That's also the time when aerosols were a big issue. The CFCs, the fluorocarbons and everything, the way that we used to do air conditioning in cars, we don't use that ancient, like, unless you got a really old car, you don't have that coolant in it anymore. They changed it. But, uh-oh.
Please pardon this interruption. I need the following students to report to the Commons. Danielle Anderson Walden, Melissa Arguellen, Augustine Arvizio, Trista Gatrio, Keisha Becker Brooks, Zachary Berry, Jesus Sarris,
Let me check on mine. This is gonna take a second.
Kaden Dixon Pajot, Rachel Julie, William Edwards, Samantha Gannon, London Heron Arello, Bryson Jackson, Anthony Lucky, Heather Liddick, Jonathan Martin, Taylor Maynard, Haley McNutt, Ricky Meredith,
Sarah
Sean Nunn,
Keenan. Second
Emily
that.
Osborne, Emma Payne, Arabella Parker, Selena Perez, Mark Phillips, Dominic Ramirez, Jerry Ramirez Torres, Marco Reyna, Robert Reynolds, Justin Roberts, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Ty Kissima, J.C. Wall, Joel White, Anna Wilcox, Michael Wright, Trevor Wright,
It's just people that miss the star test. That's all it is. Because today's the makeup.
Hannah Chapman, Jalen Day, Desiree Franklin, Akira Harris, Alexandra Martinez, Ainsley McDaniel, Montana Miller, Caden Oates, Logan Powers, Lainey Rushing, Kelly Sterling, Aurora Simpson, Skylar Tackle, and that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, so as I was saying, because I just now lost my train of thought, starting around 1970-ish, that's when we started noticing that we've had a gradual increase in temperatures of the ocean. And yes, I know that there's this little blip over here in the Pacific where we had some cooling. But as a whole, and there's also, that's the southern hemisphere. So the Atlantic is the worst of the worst as far as what I'm looking at. Yet you're not going to have to be able to pull data off of the chart. It just shows you that planet-wide, we have had a gradual uptick in temperatures. And then I know there's that little blip that's halfway in between. We just love to make stuff, and production uses carbon dioxide, or at least it gives off carbon dioxide in order to do what it is that we like to have. Above 3,000 meters as far as ocean depth, we've had an uptick of about I guess it's supposed to be 0.6 degrees Celsius. That's a typo. Let me fix that. That is a typo. I put an extra 0 in here. It's not 0.06. Let me fix this. Sorry. Like I said, I didn't have a chance to. I know it doesn't sound like a lot. That translates to around 1 degree Fahrenheit, give or take. But because the ocean can store so much heat, it is a big thing. I'm not gonna make you guys do the math to translate that into air temperature or anything like that. The oceans store so much more energy, which I know you guys probably haven't had physics, so you don't even know what the J stands for. Energy is measured in something called a joule, Joule. That's what the J is there for. It's just the unit for energy. And you have about a 30-time increase the difference between the oceans and the atmosphere. I'm not going to try to even remotely take the decimals out to be able to compare them to each other. We know with this carbon dioxide uptick, if you don't know what anthropogenic means, it means human related is all that really means. We know it's us. Okay, we give off so much carbon dioxide that it rivals a flood basalt eruption. We just do. And some countries are way worse about their pollution than others. A lot of the civilized world seems to be trying to curb, or they like to always call it a carbon footprint. But honestly, you're not going to get rid of oil. I mean, we have alternatives, but you're not getting rid of oil. You're not getting rid of fossil fuels. It's how are we using them? Are we being responsible? Because if we're not, this is going to really change. And I wish I would have caught that typo before I put it up. But it's okay. Like I said, it's been a long couple weeks. Oceans are going to keep doing their thing. Like I said, the ocean is the heat sink. It just does a really good job at absorbing the energy because of the high specific heat of water. It takes a lot of energy to heat it up, but it also takes a lot of time to let it cool back off. And so it's going to push that energy through the currents around the different parts of the plant. Like I said, with the north, that's sort of how those areas stay warmer. It's from the actual currents themselves. When you have warming with water, most things, as they get warmer, they expand. And water is no exception. Water is just the weird thing about cooling off. It hits a certain point and it starts to expand below 4 degrees Celsius, but it's a chemistry thing. If I don't know how I want to say this. With expansion of water, you have a change in density. If you don't change salinity, okay, so we've got two different things going on. We've got volume change, and we've also got salt load change. These are so good. I really thought the rain was going to make it better, and it just made it worse. When the ocean sort of acts like a buffer for the atmosphere, but eventually we will hit a tipping point where it's not gonna be able to cushion us from this increase in the carbon dioxide load, the global warming effect. And if it has enough heat, the question is, where is it going to push it? Where is it going to move it? I don't know if we're going to have like another thermal maximum where there's like zero ice at all, and then the oceans would rise by about 1,000 feet. I don't know if we're going to hit that. We did at one point in time. I think they're open here. I still don't know what happened to my hall pass. It's been gone for like 2 weeks. I don't know. Anyway, most of our water is in the ocean. And we've already mentioned that most of our water is salt. We have the fresh, most of it's frozen. Of all of the water, only about 1% of it is available in the liquid fresh state. Most of the evaporation obviously is going to come from the ocean because that's where most of the water is. We're still going to have evaporation from lakes, rivers, and streams. And we've got transpiration, which is just plant evaporation. It's still a type of evaporation. Most of the rain is going to fall on the oceans because it's most of the surface of the planet. And if we have our major river, the Mississippi, just 1% increase in rainfall is the yearly discharge from the Mississippi River. It's a lot. We've got, I'm sorry, I thought there was one more in here. There's not. We went through the water cycle. I know that was probably one of the easiest things you guys have done because you've learned about it multiple times now. The amount of heat that is pumped into the atmosphere because the ocean cannot contain it. If you have an increase in temperature, you have an increase in the ability for the moisture content in the atmosphere. More moisture in the atmosphere is going to increase the severity of storms in the water cycle. All of these things feed into each other. It's just one big, giant linked system. Yes. Yeah, this carries over to the next slide. So like I said, I am still working on your test, which means I haven't even made the review yet. I will have one thrown together for you guys for tomorrow. I don't think I'm going to be gone tomorrow now. I don't know. I'm waiting for the call from the vet. I don't know. It's going to be one of those last second kind of things. I might have to push that off till next week. Go do the stuff I got to do. All right, so the water cycle is going to get more intense. Okay, it's just, like I said, more heat, more moisture, more severe storms, whether you're getting the flooding side of the coin or you're getting the drought side of the coin. It just depends. And it depends, like we talked about yesterday, at least with us, the El Nino and the La Nina, like what's happening with these high and low pressures. Where is the moisture going to be pushed and where is it going to be pushed from? Two more. At the equator, like I said, you're going to have more heat, okay, which is going to force more evaporation. And so at lower latitudes, which is the equator, you're going to have more salt left behind, more moisture goes up, gets traveled through clouds, and then eventually precipitates somewhere else. And that's going to increase the salinity specifically of the Atlantic Ocean. All the other ones do it too, but specifically it's the Atlantic that seems to be having this problem. Upper ocean is just the most like not super deep down where we've got all the cooler stuff. At the poles, because precipitation is transferred there, whether it be rain or snow, I don't care. It's coming back down as fresh water. That's what's going to reduce the salinity at the poles. When we talk, and I'm sort of like jumping back and forth, when I show the conveyor belt, that's what drives cold water is the salt content. It's not the temperature gradient like that is at the equator. The amount of fresh water that's increasing at the poles is having a major effect on the conveyor belt, which is the floor of the ocean. Right now, it hasn't broken it yet, but enough of a tip on either side could completely and totally alter the way that the global water is pumped through this conveyor system. Have that one here. I'll keep my stuff and take it out. I know you don't have some of these images. You don't really have to know how to read all the different hydrographs. So we've had 50 years of warming in the ocean. We have had an increase in the salt load specifically towards the equator over the same time period. And like I said, it's because the increased heat is allowing the water to go into the atmosphere because of the heat of vaporization of water. Instead, I'm sort of going back and forth between chemistry and Earth space right now. But this is having a major effect. If you get too much of a salt load in the ocean, it can kill fish, which I know if there's saltwater fish, well, there's such a thing as too much salt. And if you cross that tipping point, it can kill them. That was why we had such a long time to recover. If you go back, like before the Triassic, when we had the Permian extinction, that's one of the reasons why it took so long for life to recover was the salt load in the ocean, trying to get from the ocean onto land. So it's not, I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime, but I also remember when these things were literally fantasy from Star Trek. So I'm not that old. Okay, this shows you the change in salt load. Red is higher, red is bad. But so we go like before I was born, our salt level was quite a bit lower. Like I said, this started changing in the early 70s is when we started seeing the big uptick. So we had a nice lower Atlantic salt level. And so here's when I was a little kid. This is when everybody like just started realizing that we were having a problem. We weren't really doing anything about it yet. We still had the bad fluorocarbons and everything going on with coolants. But this is when we started realizing there was a problem. And I know I don't have anything that's like recent. Like I said, a lot of these models are pulled off of data that's anywhere from 10 to like 40 years old. But as we get closer to when y'all were maybe born in 2000, or about to be born in 2000, the salt load has just exponentially increased in the Atlantic. 1979, so the year after I was born, this is what our northern cap looked like. And like I said, this a lot of this stuff is older, but it's the information that we have to pull. And then if I superimpose the same cap, because this is Greenland, obviously this is Alaska, this is North America, so this is the Arctic cap. If I impose it with 2003, you actually can see the reduction of the caps. I do know that we've actually had ice gain back since then, but I don't have like a perfect image that I can stack on top of this for current. So like I said, they're going to grow, they're going to advance, they're going to retreat. We're not going to stop this cyclic pattern of the earth. It's just that we're sort of making things go a little bit faster than they should be. We do have major ice reduction with Greenland. I don't know if this one shows the before and the after line. I'm not seeing it up here. I'm not, and there's all different kinds of data that's actually on that particular map that I'm not gonna have you yank out. But your biggest temperature change, even though I had mentioned 3,000 meters deep, is really in the upper 1,000 meters of the ocean's water. But yeah, Greenland is one that they're watching quite a bit, and it keeps having major calving of its ice. So does Antarctica, for that matter. A huge chunk broke off like a month ago, maybe. I don't think it was that long. All right, so the two major things that are going to be affected, the stuff that we talked about yesterday, and I know I didn't put the little squiggly thing over the end, sorry. I tried to fix all of those, but apparently I missed this one. ENSO and the NAO. So ENSO is El Nino, La Nina, back and forth. That's what we talked about yesterday. NAO, so there are other oscillations that are in our ocean besides the ones that directly affect us. It's obviously going to be the ones that I mentioned more than anything else. Uh-oh, this is my neighbor. Hold on. Hello? Oh, well, I'm teaching right now. What's up? Uh-huh. There is no way I'm getting in the kitten right now.
You're good.
Okay, I appreciate it. No, we had a conversation. Like, no, I think I want fewer animals, but I do appreciate it. No, that's okay. Thanks. Okay, bye-bye. Here I'm thinking somebody's breaking into my house and she wants to know if I want a kitten. No, thank you. All right, so our convection currents are interfered with, or streams are interfered with. The thermohaline is, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, probably not. There's basically an ocean within the ocean. And so you go down to a certain depth and you can see it, and you can see the line where you've got less and then you've got more salty, and that's called the thermohaline, the heat salt level. That's not something that we want to mess with. That's what drives the lower part of the ocean's conveyor belts. Okay, the upper part is primarily controlled not by the salt, okay, but by the temperature. But yeah, you mess up the conveyor belt and we're in big trouble. I don't know where it's going to be in big trouble, but as a whole, we're going to be in big trouble. This is part of the conveyor system. Obviously, this is like our part of the planet, and you have the other part. You're going to have a major change with where the temperature is pushed to. Okay, so this one is what is considered to be a functioning or an on conveyor system. I don't know if I imposed, let me look at my cheat sheet. I don't know if I imposed the image on top of this. No, it's on a totally separate slide. But in this is normal. I mean, this is what's happening right now, where from us, okay, so we're down here, okay, we have a push from the Gulf Stream and the NAO, okay, pushes the heat up towards where England and Ireland, and then eventually up to like, what's up there? That's not Denmark. Denmark's over there. That's Finland, and I don't know, my geography is horrid, but it pushes the heat up that way. Now, when we have an off conveyor, it should be, why did I animate that twice? I don't know why I animated that twice. Let's fix that. And if I pull the image up with an off conveyor belt, instead of the heat being pushed properly up around the British Isles, it's actually pushed back down and it gets hooked back down around towards Africa. So it's not that the heat doesn't get moved, it just gets moved in a different direction than what's considered normal. Now, of course, as human beings, we decide what's normal because, you know, we're more important than anything else, and what we say so is always right. So an on conveyor is going to do proper heat transport towards the north. An off conveyor is going to keep that from happening, and you're going to have cooler temperatures. And they do fluctuate back and forth. I seriously thought somebody was like getting ready to break into my house when my neighbor called me. I almost never answer my phone. Okay. And a few more, lots more pictures too. We do have, specifically with the oxygen isotope record, which I'm not going to go back in depth with it, but the ice and the ocean sediment, really the ocean sediment cores are a better factor than the ice, because the ice has only been around for about 30 million years. We have records of this. Okay, and as we're developing new technologies, instruments to be able to retrieve samples or analyze said samples, I'm pretty gosh darn convinced that some of the stuff that I'm explaining to you is going to change. It's not that I'm trying to mislead you, it's just that we're going to learn new things. We're just like, you know, the earth used to be flat and you'd fall off the edge and the sea monsters would eat you a few hundred years ago. I hate using the phrase global warming and greenhouse warming, but that's unfortunately the language. We have, it's more than 50 years. It's 60 something years of hard data. Like I said, it had to have the instruments to be able to start recording this first, but since about the mid 60s, so really more than 50 years, being able to measure the salt load, we know that we're not necessarily in a downward spiral, but the difference between the high salt and the low salt concentrations is really quickly affecting that conveyor belt, the last few slides that I showed you. Where is the warm temperature from the equator being pushed? Is it being pushed towards the poles, which is what we consider to be normal, or is it being kept at the equator, which is not considered to be normal? But these things do flip-flop back and forth. It should be open right here. Until somebody else gets the principal's mad and they lock them down again. So, like I said, the ocean and the atmosphere have a partnership. and we've got transfer of heat from one to the other. The one that does have the ability to hold more heat than anything else is the ocean. You hit the tipping point where it just can't hold on to it properly. That's when we're in big trouble. That's when you have huge melting of caps. You've got all of your coastal areas are going to be flooded. Like I said, if all of the ice melted, our oceans would be about 200 feet above our heads right now here in Azle. This is the salt load is what worries me more than anything else. And the salt load wouldn't be changing if we didn't have a temperature issue, if we didn't have the carbon dioxide issue. Obviously, without carbon dioxide, the plants wouldn't breathe, wouldn't make us oxygen, and then we'd suffocate. So it's necessary. It's just keeping it within, and I'm not sure how well we can manage it, but keeping it within a certain range and not crossing that tipping point. We're almost done. One more like this and then a picture, the NaO, the one that I have not gotten to depth with because we focused on the ENSO, the El Nino and the La Nina, not the NaO. And like I said, there are other oscillations. I'm just focusing on the ones that are around our neck of the woods. Like I said, we're projecting into the future with these models. Some of the models are based off of fudged numbers from the early 90s. It was a big controversy when I was your age, when they were first starting to study this stuff, because we found out that those scientists just changed their data, which is not what you do. But they wanted to keep getting grants from the government, and if they did not basically prove what the government's agenda was at the time, then they knew that they wouldn't get more funding. And so they just changed their data, and they based a lot of our global warming information off of Venus, not Earth, which is something that they really don't talk about anymore, but that's what they did. Mars used to be very Earth-like. Used to have rivers and all that kind of stuff. Still has water, just very, very, very salty. Very, very, very salty. All right, last one. This one, this is the now. This is the other major current. So you have your equatorial, warmer, salty water with a proper conveyor is supposed to be pushed up into, like I said, it's delivered literally to England. It just depends on your temperature systems, and winds and air temperature, and then currents and ocean temperature are tied at the hip. Joined at the hip, I think is actually the right way to say that phrase. If it gets too out of balance, then we have something like we did last summer, and we've got a horrendous hurricane season. Although, and I had to fact check myself because I'm not a meteorologist. We are supposed to be getting out of La Nina, which is what we're in right now, and we're supposed to be switching towards an El Nino. But we'll see what happens.